I'm going to start with you because you work with a lot of different companies. So can you just sort of give us a view of the landscape in terms of where enterprises are today in their journey to AI at scale, moving beyond POCs?
Thanks, Abby. And it's moving very quickly. It's moving very quickly. So even over the last 12, 18 months, there is a shift. I think even this AI summit last year, this year, we can see the shift. It's moving quickly from POCs. We were in this POC heaven, yeah, so that there were hundreds of thousands of proof of concepts happening. We are finally moving to production. So I think that's the big shift happening. At the same time, the nature of progress and the pace of progress in that moving from pilots to production varies a lot across industries. Telecom, some of the large operators that we work with, I see tremendous progress. On the other end of the spectrum, some of the large banks that we work with, it's painful and slow. They're really, really bogged down by regulation and concerns around data security, and it's very slow, and there are a number of industries in between. The third kind of point I would make is that most of the work, even what's going into production, is still more internal use cases. So how do you change, how do you impact developer productivity? How do you use more intelligent chatbots for customer service? How do you drive effectiveness and personalization in marketing communication? So still, a lot of the use cases are more internal. The use cases which are more external, which are more client-facing, customer-facing, I think they're beginning to happen. A lot of that, of course, is around personalization. That's a very, across industries, personalization, moving to hyper-personalization, seeing more of that. And the fourth point I would make is that a lot of the effort in terms of AI at scale is building up the infrastructure and doing that in kind of like a cautious fashion. Because if you go with what the big tech providers would have us believe, and I was at AWS re:Invent last week in Vegas, if you go with all of that stack, it would be kind of like infinite cost and never to achieve ROI. Yeah, so there is a bit of it's a practical set of choices you have to make that you can't dump your existing infrastructure for AI. How do you really infuse AI intelligently in your existing infrastructure? And that's a lot of hard yards, and it's probably taking large enterprises more time than what they had anticipated.
Great, thank you. It was good overview. And the next question I want to have all of you answer this next one. And the question is, what are the foundational pieces that are most important to get to AI at scale? And what's the hardest part? So just pick one thing. That's the hard part. Pick one thing and explain why it's so important and hard.
I guess I'll start. On our opinion, it's data. Having the right data curated, interlinked, and ready in an infrastructure way to actually build AI use cases on top of it that drive real practical value, it's really hard. If you go back about 10 years, we were talking about big data and how we need to take all our structured data and get it into data lakes and the right infrastructure. That was a big transformation from the industry, but we hadn't really thought about it for unstructured data, right? So when you think about large enterprises like us who have 35,000 employees, not all of our unstructured data is curated, it's tagged the right way, but it's actually really important to have the right quality of that data and all of that to drive real value. And the reason behind it is in a consumer setting or what I would do at home, models that are trained on publicly available data are quite useful. But when you get to an enterprise situation where you want to use some of that innate knowledge and proprietary knowledge, having the right data plugged in and at the ready is actually probably, in my opinion, one of the most foundational things you can have, and also one of the most difficult.
Okay, no, well, I would say that fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. Fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. I think that we tech people tend to dive into solutions because we are so familiar with that, and we sometimes lose the perspective, or we have that major weakness or temptation to get into solution before really understanding if we are solving something to someone. So I believe that one fundamental pillar would be user case focused, user centric, and companies need to have a framework to prioritize consumers' jobs to be done or needs to solve, and also to have like a process to prototype, iterate, improve, and get it into the best shape possible. So I would say that there are three elements to get this right, like a design thinking process to prioritize the consumer needs jobs to be done, to say. Then a clear KPI framework to measure success. And lastly, I would say a continuous improvement process to get it right.
Yeah, so that experimentation and not getting too wedded to any one thing until you get the data and find out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's okay, okay. So I think I would say there's only one thing that sort of one should focus on really, really hard. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Better? Yeah, I think there's only one thing that one should focus on, and everything else would follow from there. You know, AI is a big fabric. Question is, where do you pick it from? And I would center that on value. And when one starts thinking about value of AI, it has to start with data, and it has to start with infusion of that in whether it's your workflow, whether it's helping you run your business efficiently, whether it's about growth. Just the way software at some point infused itself into our workflows, AI needs to infuse itself into our software workflows. As we think about value, if I'm bringing value of $10 by spending $100, I don't think that's a great thing. And that's where cost becomes an important thing. A comment earlier made that if you don't want to sort of spend everything on your stack yet, people are going to, if you produce information, but if people can't consume it, then there's a problem. And this is where education is essential of form. Now, education doesn't mean that you need to know how to build a solution. And I'll give a simple example. Give you this amazing Oracle friend, advisor. You go to a casino, no matter what you play, here's a guarantee. You put $100, 51% of the time you're going to win, double it. 49% of the time you'll lose everything. Now, if you go in all in every time, before you know it, you will be out of all your money. But then maybe what you should do, something like every time, keep half of your money and invest half of it. You will never go out of money, and you will grow 51 over 49 rate, right? So education of that form is essential. That is, how do you work with it? Then finally, one way or the other.
So Devarat, you've just covered a lot of ground there. What would you say is the most important foundational piece and hardest to do? Of all the things that you've just mentioned, like which is the key?
I think focus on value is the hardest thing right now, because there are lots of gimmicks going on. I think focusing on the value would be the best way to determine what choices you make.
And is it hard because people haven't yet conceived what potential value could be?
Few things. I appreciate the dialogue. There are few things. One is value perceived versus value realized. And so a form of how do you measure it, that's one part. And that needs to be done context by context. And the second is, as one does that, one has to take a holistic view rather than just, hey, I got this right, rather than forgetting about everything else that it has an impact on.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can add. So I think the biggest gap is like a disconnect between the business layer and technology. It's a gaping big gap. You know, if you look at a lot of the technology, how it is getting produced, by the big tech players, it's kind of, I was at Vegas last week at AWS, and I was sitting in all these brilliant conversations about each layer of the stack, and the business use case was almost like an afterthought. And it was almost like, you have to do, you have to kind of talk about the business use case, but it's actually not tightly connected with what you're talking about the stack. And I think that simply is the biggest gap which I think is there, which is why the value question that Devrat is talking about. Because the folks who understand the business opportunities and pain points to be addressed don't understand data and technology well enough to translate that. Folks who understand technology and data have gone to a completely different planet in terms of the complexity. They are in a world of their own. They're a world of their own. And that connection between the two is not happening well enough today. And that is the root for why there is a value crisis. And by the way, I think that value delivered crisis that Devrat talked about, we haven't seen it yet play out. It is going to bite us. We are going to see it much more as we move from AI pilots to AI at scale. Because as we do that, the cost implication of AI and all the technology that we are building is going to, we are going to be amazed by that.
Thank you. Really interesting. And I wanted to get into some actual use cases and how you're working things inside your companies. And so MasterCard's been doing AI for quite a long time now. It's not like it's a new thing. But Gen AI is different in being very highly democratized. Everybody can use it. So how do you categorize and prioritize which cases to pursue and which to invest in to move toward AI at scale?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we thought about it very serially. So at the beginning, at the early stages a few years ago, we actually started with a very democratic approach. We actually allowed everybody at the company to send in their ideas. So we collected hundreds and hundreds of different ideas for how they envisioned using generative AI and more advanced AI more broadly across their day-to-day. And that's where we started, because what we felt, going back to the disconnect between the business and the technology, is we really need to hear from those that are going to eventually be using these technologies on where they feel the pain and where they perceive the value is. We've evolved that into a much more structured process now, where still anybody in the company can submit ideas, and we get dozens every day. But we have a very well-structured prioritization framework. And the way we prioritize things is much like we prioritize for our products. We look at value, we look at feasibility, so what's the level of effort that's going to take, and what's the demand? Is this applicable not just for this one use case, but more broadly? And so the reason that has worked really well for us, I would say, is for three reasons, and very practical reasons I would encourage you all to take away as you go back to your teams. Is the first one is there's a connection to value. So as we now decide where to invest our finite resources that have a very, very specific skill set, we are very focused on the value that it should drive, and we can use that as a benchmark, but also to make sure that we as a company are being disciplined in taking advantage of the resources. The second one is, because the industry is early on, we are also making sure that these smaller use cases we start with not just drive value, but they also make us build a more foundational capability. So when there is part of the stack that we don't have, we also look at prioritizing a use case that is going to push us to develop that, so that when the next version of that comes in, it's that much easier for us to build. So we're experimenting while building the stack and having a little bit of that comfort. And the third thing is consistency. So now, after a lot of work, we have visibility into every AI initiative around the company. And so I can see how long it takes, who's building it, do we have to do more of the work on our central AI and data capability teams, or can we start enabling the business to learn how to build this? So that level of consistency and repeatability is also just as important, because it moves advanced AI or generative AI from being, something that only a few can do, to eventually fully democratizing it around the organization.
Fantastic. Miguel, how do you go about prioritizing? When you think about classifying different kinds of opportunities. How do you go about that at Diageo?
Yeah, well, at Diageo, we always ask the question, what is the gift for the consumer? And as magical as a gift is, we are very rigorous on how to design and prioritize and categorize these solutions. So we have developed this three-lens map, opportunity map, where we address the opportunities on three main lenses. The first one is the desirability from users, from consumers. So we are very confident about the needs that we are solving and what is if this is adding value for consumers. The second one is about feasibility. How feasible are these propositions are, and from different standpoints. But the third one is how viable they are. And then we categorize how it works. We categorize them each on we evaluate each of the propositions on these three different lenses. And based on the ones that highly score across all of these three, they will get prioritized. And then they will also get categorized by the different value or different markets. There are different ways to categorize it by them. We do it. But the main point is to get the right ones in place and developed according to these three lens opportunity map.
It sounded very similar to what Fed was saying about the
Yeah.
desirability, viability, feasibility.
We did not coordinate this before.
It sounds like best practices.
I think that's right.
So, and I'd like to know from both of you, when you go through that process, what are you narrowing, like what's the number you start with and what are you getting down to for investment?
Well, we have this ratio of almost like less than 5% of success on all the ideas that we map. So yeah, we have this funnel approach where we call it the hopper, and we scout ideas. We have a lot of different initiatives, but the mainly is an open innovation program that we run where we scout for startups with specific solutions, and we categorize them on the hopper. And then that funnel will get you into like a 5% success rate of all the ideas that we have. Only very few ideas manage to go through.
I would say our centrally focused teams that are building capabilities for the enterprise are covering a similar percentage as what Miguel said. But part of the goal is like there's a lot of demand. People around our enterprise are very hungry to get their hands on this because I think the value potential is very clear for them. And so we are very focused on taking that, very handful of really key use cases that are so broad that A, we can apply them very broadly, but two, that then we can turn around and say, when the next idea comes in, we built what you need so that you can do it yourself. Because like at scale means you don't just have those around this room that are experts that know how to do it, that have invested their time in learning, but that it becomes just part of what your enterprise can build and integrate in what you do. And so I agree, having a funnel is really important. Our lens for it is that the end state of the funnel actually makes sure that once you get past a certain set of checks, you can enable people to take it into their own hands.
Great. Deborah, we were talking earlier about, I know some of you in the room may be old enough to remember Michael Hammer and the whole wave of re-engineering that happened back in the 80s or 90s. And that had a really profound impact on organizations. And it kind of feels right now like we're starting to go through, or we're getting set up for something similar. Gen AI right now is very discrete, small scale kinds of things, but you can see where it's going to really change how the work gets done. So how do you see companies balancing between improving things that they already do within existing processes and workflows against really changing what they do and how they do it?
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, reference to Hammer is very close to my heart because Mrs. Hammer is one of the donors for important fellowships at IDSS. It's an institute that I, along with my colleagues, helped set up a decade ago. Coming to reorganization, one way to reinterpret Michael's thesis is that reorganization is same as restarting effectively. Now, something that was very timely historically around the time that these things came around, where computers came and then software came heavily, that changed the way people worked, that removed certain jobs, and that added a lot of jobs. Similarly, if we do manage to do AI infusion, then I think there's a third of the jobs will disappear, a third of the jobs will change, or all jobs will change, and a new third of the jobs will be created. And hopefully what is created is way more than what is lost. And that would move us collectively in the right direction. Now, going back to the point I was making earlier and picking up on that thread, I think form of education around this is essential. Yes, there was in past, maybe how do you log into computer and send emails to making slides. Now it would be more about, now that data is converted into information, how do you use the information? And as all of you know, right, if I tell you that, okay, I'm sure you experienced in the morning that what is the chance it will rain? Okay, so now it's a question, is it probabilistic or what? In case you have not spent time understanding what that thing is, at some point of time, I realized after reading it is that when somebody's weather forecasters say 80% chance, it means that as per their model, 80% of that zip code will get rain. There's nothing uncertain about it. So that interpretation changes the way I think about it. In a similar manner, when AI recommendations will come to you, you need to understand what that means so that then you can reinterpret right way and utilize and put it into practice. And I feel that that's where education has to play extremely important role. Universities have a very important role to play there.
Thanks. I'd like the rest of you to address this question too. So, you know, that balance between we're improving processes we already have, technology is going to be great for that, versus it's really going to change how we do things in a big way.
My view is that enterprises are not spending enough time on that question. I think the focus is very much here and now from an organization perspective. You know, I call it like two speeds. You know, speed one is here and now, and speed two is kind of like the bigger picture. I think it is disproportionately speed one, and I think we are staring at a very, very big issue down the line. Yeah, because there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that as AI gets to scale, the impact on current jobs is humongous. I don't believe it's one-third, one-third, one-third. I think that's, to my mind, that's wishful thinking. That's hope. That's classic human hope and positivity, which I absolutely applaud, but is not, I think, you know, see, also depends a little bit on the time horizon. Depends on the time horizon. That if you take next 3 to 5 years, that statement is probably true. Because, you know, very simply, we are spending more money on AI than the benefit we are getting. It means we are creating more jobs than jobs are getting lost. If you look at 5 to 10 years, the numbers start to change a lot. The net job losses get to like 25% or thereabouts in 5 to 10 years. And if you take 15 years, the consensus estimate, and I've been doing this research for the last 6 months, the consensus estimate is like 35, 40%. Okay? Now, it's all jobs, okay? And there is a bigger impact at the higher end of the food chain. The way this technology is very different from anything that we have seen as mankind is that so far, technology was about enabling us as humans to do more. Yeah? This is innately, because of the self-learning aspects of it, because of the generative aspects of it, and there are many, many other things that we can get into, it's kind of now doing better things that were innately human. Okay? And therefore, the impact is on the high-end jobs. It's on the investment bankers. It's on the management consultants. It's on the surgeons. Yeah? And that debate, I think when you ask like, you know, incremental versus future, I don't know if that's where you were getting to. You know, I think that what is that view of the future how should business models evolve? How should organization models evolve? So that, we are able to, this vacuum that is going to get created. Because look, let's not be, let's keep our sights clear. Next 2 to 3 years, there is a lot of haziness. There's a lot of haziness because AI is getting to that scale, okay? Models are getting to that point of tuning and learning where you start, get them from 60%, 70% to 90%, okay? The infrastructure is coming into place. So next 2 to 3 years, you may not see that kind of impact. And that may lead us to say, oh, maybe it's X and maybe it's Y. But if you take a forward-looking view, I think it's a very, very big implication for enterprises, but beyond enterprises. And I think there is not enough awareness and debate, and I think it needs to happen.
Fed,
Yeah, so if I may, our perspective right now is to be very, I would say, pragmatic because of that haziness. I can't predict what's going to happen in the next 10 years. But what we can do is be very pragmatic to prepare our people for reacting to this change, not just from day-to-day job, but from changing expectations from our customers and from the consumers that everybody interacts in the payment ecosystem. And so what we said is, well, if we need to be prepared, if we need our people to understand the technology, how to use it, how to co-work with it, and how to react to changes that will come gradually, we felt that we need to do 3 things. And we talk about it internally this way, in the way that we've developed our AI, what I would call our AI fluency curriculum, or the way we train, and we think about it in 3 levels. The first is there's a basic level of fluency that I expect every single one of our employees to have, because it's going to be beneficial no matter what they do, right? Understanding the technology, what we do, how we actually use it, both internally and in the way that you experience it as a consumer. And then there's 2 other levels. One is, how is your role going to change? And I expect that type of training, it's going to evolve. This year, it's going to be this, and as agents become much more prevalent, it might evolve, right? But part of it is how you use the tools, and part of it is how you have to have the knowledge to deploy it in your day-to-day work. And then level 3, I think, is a little bit more future-looking, which is, I do expect that there will be roles that will be very disrupted. And so for those roles, how do we create the right skill set in the people in those roles to be ready for the next flavor of them, or to the adjacent type of roles that they're going to be best positioned to do? And so for us, it's really about preparedness, because don't think I can predict, or I haven't seen any research yet that tells, with tons of certainty what it'll be in 10 years. And so we're very focused on investing on what we can do today to help go through that change management really thoughtfully and honestly with the right skill set on our end to come out with competitive advantages out of it.
Miguel, how about you? Are you thinking about this, I don't know if you call it in level 1, level 2, or speed 1, speed 2, but are you thinking about bigger process changes that might be coming down the pike, and how are you setting up for that?
Well, I believe that big companies, they need to learn how to be ambidextrous. And they need to take care of today, but also make sure that there is a tomorrow. And they need to get intentional about reimagining and innovating the future. So personally, I don't believe on digital transformation as a whole, like transforming one entity. We have learned that that's kind of a boiling the ocean, trying to boil the ocean. Instead of that, we believe that we need to identify the key processes, the key value processes, and make them amazing, automate them, and really reinvent those key value processes and focus on let's say, the Pareto of those to really succeed on this journey and not get lost on hundreds of processes to be transformed. So that's one key principle. But then the other thing is being intentional. And that concept is very powerful, because we need to promote this culture of experimentation, but at the same time, we need to move to action. So we more than words, we need to make this happen. So companies need to source properly with the team, the tools, the knowledge to get this done, and let them work separately in terms of taking care of the today, but also reinventing or reimagining tomorrow, and focusing on key value processes that will deliver the highest amount of value for the company, and not aiming to boil the ocean in a digital transformation wave, right? So that would be my take.
So a number of people this morning talked about, sort of the impact on people and the need for sort of change management to overcome people's fears and help people on their way and get people trained and fed. You referenced that. Miguel, is there something that you're doing in that regard? Like when you think about how much energy you're putting into, developing ideas, prioritizing ideas, testing ideas, and then the people part of it, how much time are you spending on the people part of it?
Well, most of it, because all these processes are run by people. So it's all about the people. And yes, we also see the Diageo collaborators as one client, as a customer, and we understand what are the main jobs to be done or needs from the employee standpoint. And we focus on giving them the tools, the knowledge, everything they need to make this happen. But we have dedicated and fully funded teams working on these processes. And also embracing a culture of failure. That's also very important. We celebrate the kills, as we call them. If we manage to prove that the solutions are not delivering what we expect, then we kill it, and we embrace failure as part of the process. That's also very important on human behavior, because in other contexts, I have seen how fear can play a role on this. So yeah, that's important also.
Role in stifling innovation and yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I want to just touch on, it seems like we could do a whole conference on this, but Devarat, what should business leaders watch out for when it comes to data security, model explainability, and the regulatory environment? So there's a lot packed into that question, but pick one thing that you'd like to share about that.
I think, again, continuing on the theme of the value, the people who can realize that value, and then if you're to talk to something, you need to know the language. As a machine learner, as a statistician, as I would call myself, or as maybe now modern parlance AI person, I would say that I'm able to understand the features, the functional forms, the basis that drive the sort of why sort of certain model is. But then that requires a lot of understanding and knowledge. But if I'm a normal, very smart in my own domain, but not necessarily in this one, and I want to use the information to interpret it, explainability is the key. Now, maybe some form of drivers can help, but my belief is that our belief is that it's about provenance. See, I tell you something that, the reason jobs are going to change, we won't have people running between offices, delivering mails, but then sending emails. And similarly, things are going to change now. You would sort of not disagree with me because I gave you a provenance, historical data that maps a pattern. So similarly, when somebody provides you AI recommendation information, you want historical data provenance that explains that. And then based on that, maybe you can make a decision that, yeah, this makes sense, or this is totally nonsense, and let me edit it. So that means that sort of now I'm effectively talking to the system and feeding back my feedback as well. And I think that is what I would call truly a form of explainability. And then next to that, sort of immediately the other side of the coin would be whether it's a security or in a broader sense, a regulation. I think that sort of starts a next layer of questions. That is, how does one think about what does a regulation mean? Should we wait for the regulation? Utility companies in last century created tremendous value, and there's a regulation around it. Because if value is going to create it, not few should benefit, everybody should benefit. So regulation is key, and I think in my mind, a lot of those things are very nicely related and important different aspects.
And I know, Fed, that these are huge issues for your company.
They are. They are. It's been a focus for quite some time. I would say even before this kind of wave of AI. I agree 100% with what Deborah had said. I think the practical addition that I can add is, data security and the way that we like to think about it in terms of data and AI responsibility has been something that's been really, really upfront for us, especially for the last 10 years. So several years ago, we launched our data and technology responsibility principles. But what I think has made it all very special is we have an incredibly sophisticated team that has developed those governance programs. But what I think has made them very successful has been in embedding those concepts and those disciplines in the way we do our work. And so what it practically means is that we don't develop a product if up front those considerations hadn't thought about. And so when you're even at a prototype level, you're thinking about what is the ethical and responsible way to do this? How am I going to safeguard the data that's under it? I think that level of discipline has been really, really important because it's shifted from, as Everett saying, something that just an expert in the domain can do to something that is just, this is kind of the flavor in our culture of the way we do things.
Great. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. If people have questions, if you do have a question, we've got all the mics up here, but there is a mic on a stand right there. So if you have a question, you can make your way over there and ask from there. And if you just say your name and who you're with, that'd be great.
Hello, Liz Bacelar here. I'm head of AI for Under Armour, brand new position. I've been in AI, like many of you, for many, many years, like decades. This is not a fad for me. And when I say AI, there's a distinction between Gen AI. I understand that. But the issue of data, a lot of the conversations here today, no one's really tackling on where do we put the data. When we think about the largest models right now, when you think of Gemini and Llama and OpenAI and Anthropic, they offer very different point of view on protection of customer, the data rules and compliance in Europe, compliance in the US, even the positioning, right? So my question to you is it about being conscious of limitations? There's things you just cannot do right now. A lot of consumer-facing integrations will expose consumers to risk. Or is it about hedging your risk and picking your partner? Let's pick Anthropic, for instance, and then go with that. Because Microsoft Azure has been able to do a lot of great stuff, like when I was under Estée Lauder, but it's not it.
So is that question directed to anyone in particular, or?
I would like whoever wants to jump on this question.
Well, I could answer that. We think about the outcome, that it is consistent, that it doesn't hallucinate. So we control the output in a way. We own the data. We have our own environments, and it's about the content and all the data, the information you feed into this knowledge base or engine, as we call it. And then we use the LLM models to provide the language generation, but we keep all the knowledge. So we control the output, and we keep consistency about the output, so it is the right one. It's about quality, and if you rely on open sources, you will get any type of answers in the open web. So we, as a company, that also we need to be very careful about what we put out there as an alcohol company. We make sure that we control the output and we own all the data, and we use only the LLM capabilities, but we still own all the IP and information. We have control of that.
Maybe if I may just add a perspective, I spent the last 3.5 years writing a book on data. See, data, it was a very deep question that you asked, that the problem with data is that if you try to make it perfect, okay, you cannot get it perfect. So don't even try. And a lot of the problems in data management, setting up the data infrastructure, come because we're trying to do too much. We're trying to tick off all the boxes that you mentioned, and you will never get it right. And when you try to get most of it right, it actually becomes such a big initiative, project, endeavor that you never get it done. So the only way of, I think, progressing with this in the age of big data is to narrow it down. I think what Miguel and Fed have also been talking about on, I love the words you use, the magic for the customer and some very beautiful words, but really the most pertinent business problems and kind of drive that through. And I think the biggest missing piece that I see in data is understanding the domain. And I think that is the key to driving practical outputs from data. Otherwise, and if you take a purist approach, if you take a perfectionist approach, you will never get it done.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions. I see that we've got 4 people lined up here. Go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, this is Professor Nath from Rutgers University, and I'm also an advisor to many startups in the Gen AI space. The question I have is that you have used the word Gen AI as democratized AI, access to AI capabilities. So what, if you're an ISV, what prevents your own customer from saying, hey, we can develop that feature too? So how are you going to cope with your own customer being a competition, so to speak? Because MasterCard can say, why do I need you? I have enough my own data science team, I will develop it. So what kind of scale and what features do you think you can sell to an existing customer?
It's a great question. So when I think about the word democratization, the way I digest it myself is the barrier to entry to a number of more expert things has become a lot lower, right? Like it's not that hard now to just go prompt whatever LLM you want and get Python code that gets you 80% of the way there. So for us, it comes in 2 things. The first one, it's actually trust. It goes back to the last question we talked about in the panel. We have an approach to safeguarding and protecting your data and the way we manage it and the transparency that you have against it that is very, very much part of what we do. And so we believe that people will choose to work with us because of that trust. So that's the first. The second one is about the applicability, right? So sure, everybody can create a feature, but there's 2 things about it. How we can embed it in the way we work with our customers is unique. And the other piece that's very important is that, and this is not a MasterCard thing, I think this actually permeates for everybody, but every company, every enterprise has proprietary data as part of what they do. And how you use that data is becoming much, much more important than just having the ability to do something with it.
So, I mean, if I may just add one anecdote and then take one more question. Home Depot, right? You go there, they'll say, we'll teach you how to build anything. Still, sort of, we have contractors. So I think, similarly, I think building a production AI application does take experts in my mind. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we don't have time for one more question, but I think our speakers will probably be around for a little bit, so you can ask them yourselves. I have one follow-up, just closing out question. So given what you know today, what one piece of advice do you have for business leaders wrestling with how and when to scale in a tweet-sized answer?
Yeah. Forget technology, focus on your customer.
Great.
Yeah. For me, very similar. Be practical. Be able to explain very clearly what you're achieving.
Fall in love with the problem and not with the solution.
I would say value, people, regulation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you.